Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
I'm Jill, the host of The Nourished Child. Let me ask you something. Do you wonder if your child is getting all the nutrition they need? Or do you feel unsure about what's going on with your child and their eating? Feeding kids is H-A-R-D hard. I've raised 4 of my own children, and as a pediatric dietitian who works with kids and families, I know the job of nourishing and nurturing our children is a big one, full of emotional swings, frustrations, and worries. That's why I created thenourishedchild.com, the ultimate parent resource for children's nutrition and feeding. There, you will find free articles, e-guides, and programs to help you better understand your child, food, your own feeding, and their eating. Check out The Nourished Child today. Head to thenourishedchild.com. And now for the show. Hey friends, welcome back to the Nourished Child podcast. Jill here. And what you're about to hear is a one-time counseling session with a mother who is working, a new mother to a 1-year-old or almost 1-year-old, but who also has a teenage son. She is navigating work-life balance and 2 very different stages of feeding and development. This is part of a new offering that I've created for this podcast, whereby you can come and have a conversation with me for about 30 minutes. We'll answer your question and talk through some of the factors to consider, perhaps some quick tips for you to put into place. Everything will be anonymous, but quite helpful, I think, for others who are listening to the show. If you're interested, you can connect with me by email or by going to thenourishedchild.com/podcast, or just click on the podcast button and you'll see a little voice microphone where you can record your question and share your email address with me, and we can get you all set up for a one-time counseling session. I hope you enjoy this. I hope you're having a great week, and be sure to give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. And here's our guest. Well, hello there. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful to be here.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I am a working mom. My wife and I both own our own businesses, and we're also committed to being there for our 2 boys. So life is very full, but it's full of things we love. We have a 13-year-old son that my wife carried that I met when he was 6. And then we have a new baby who's just over 1 year old that I gave birth to last January. So we love our boys and we love our work. And I'm excited to talk today a little bit about how food fits in that equation in a healthy way.
Yeah. So you have 2 boys, 1 teenager and 1 almost a very, very young toddler. And I'm sure with quite different needs, certainly different eating habits and possibly different approaches to food. And so tell me, what is life like with food and raising 2 boys?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think first off, you mentioned they're opposites, but they're also just physical opposites. It's actually funny because our 13-year-old is shooting up like a rocket ship and just like the string bean. And then our 1-year-old was 9.5 pounds, born early. And so he's always been giant. And so they're really funny together. They both love food and love eating and have what seem to be healthy relationships with food. But our younger one is a chunk of monk, and our older one, the focus is on getting him enough calories to sustain his active lifestyle. And he's on ADD medicine, so he doesn't eat a lot during the day. And of course, we're both working moms. And so food is a balance between, my wife loves to cook. And so on most evenings, we love her home cooked food. But it's also, what kind of healthy things can we have ready to go, whether it's a sweet green salad or Uncrustable peanut butter sandwiches in the freezer to help them both get what they need without making it too much about food or without not paying enough attention to food. So they're at really different life stages. And I think each of them have different things that I'm thinking about and concerned about. But on a fundamental level, I think what comes into play with both of them is my own relationship with food. And I had an eating disorder for a long time. It started when I was 15 years old and lasted for almost a decade. And while I've healed a lot and come a long way since that experience, I know that my food issues no doubt come into play when I'm talking to them about food, when I'm feeding them, when I'm, showing them what choices I'm making. And so I think while I do want to dive into specifics about both of them, I think the first thing to address is just how do I feel confident in my relationship with food? And then I'm not going to mess them up forever just because of my history.
Yeah, no, I hear this concern from parents quite a bit. In fact, I was just talking to somebody earlier this morning and said, there's almost no way that some of your past, whether it involves an eating disorder or it involves whatever in your childhood around food, grandparents that made you eat certain things, or our food history from childhood almost always seeps into our parenting. And kids have this amazing ability to trigger some of those things in us. So I guess my question, or, just to explore this angle, where do you feel or find yourself possibly getting triggered or worrying more, or even just those moments when you're having a lot of dialogue in your head?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's different with both of them. I think with the 1-year-old, he had cake on his 1-year-old birthday. And my wife is super fun loving and totally balances me out, because I guess the recommendation is that toddlers have sugar only on special occasions. And she's like, it's a special occasion. It's a Sunday. Like, she's just always advocating for our younger son to have treats, and then grandmothers who sneak him cookies and all this stuff. And so I noticed myself with him having sugar being almost militant and restrictive about it, to the point where last week I gave our 1-year-old a little piece of a brownie I was eating, and my wife was shocked. She's like, what's gotten into you?
Yeah.
And she's a really good influence on me, and I'm grateful for her in my life and in my boy's life. But I do notice with sugar and making sure getting vegetables and just it's like a very structured approach that might overshoot its usefulness in terms of dealing with a toddler who's, it's more about his experience in general is what my understanding versus what he eats at a specific meal.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've observed in my work with parents is that sometimes when an eating disorder is in the background, or if it's part of the history, let's say, eating disorders can be super prescriptive. And some of that prescriptiveness, that's what's coming out in the parenting moments. Like that old thinking of, I have to eat this or not eat that, or this amount of this, or, not too much of that. That is prescriptiveness with food. And I think what happens is that that's what's getting triggered. Not necessarily the old eating disorder, but like just the comfort of knowing exactly what you're supposed to feed, knowing exactly how much. And I even find parents that don't have that in their background feeling more comfortable with more prescriptiveness applied to particularly young children and what they eat. So while we have prescriptions of how much do you serve a toddler and what variety of foods do you serve them and what should be the balance, the truth is, those are just those guidelines, or, you could call them rules if you wanted to. And rules when it comes to kids are meant to be broken. Kids don't generally fall in line with the rules. They're more, I don't know, I guess as parents, as adults, little kids challenge us to tap into our extreme flexibility. And that's not always easy, especially when we're busy, we're working, we got to move things through the day. Is any of that resonating for you?
For sure. And that's what you described that's me, prescriptiveness, wanting to read the research, know exactly. And I'm just so glad as I'm listening to you talk that I do have my wife, because first of all, she's done this before with our older son and he survived.
Yeah.
He's a great eater. And second of all, she brings this fun and appreciation for food, from cooking to let's try this new recipe to, ooh, this is going to be a fun way to get our greens in. And just to have that perspective for me and for our boys, I think is so powerful. Everything that you're saying is kind of how she is naturally. And it gives me, I love it, but it also gives me anxiety because it's not a prescription, right? And so it's hard to just be like, okay, I'll just trust you. I'll just go with the flow. I'll trust that he's a toddler, that he's learning. But it's good to know that what she's saying and what I've experienced listening to her and working together, that is truly a good recipe for success, that rules are meant to be broken with kids and not to lose sight of the big picture.
Yeah. And you mentioned the word trust. And when I think of babies and I think of their developmental stage, that's their whole goal of infancy, is to develop trust and attachment. And that's the baby goal, but it's also the goal for the parent too. The parent who is raising that baby, that the goal is for that parent to trust their baby. Sure, it's on you to pick the foods you're going to offer and prepare the foods that you're going to give to your son. But at the end of the day, there's a level of trust that you have to have that he knows what his body needs and he will eat as much as his appetite calls for. And trusting that that process is indeed innate, whole, and designed to work, that's your challenge. That's your goal for infancy. Trust that he can eat and eat as much as he needs, and his body will respond and grow well.
Yeah, he's so big. The doctor, we brought him in and he was joking, I think we need a failure to thrive workup on this 30-pound 9-month-old. So he is thriving. I mean, he's doing really well. And I mean, the other thing that comes to mind, I'm taking heart in what you're saying about flexibility and trust. The other thing is him feeding himself. And it's so cute when he feeds himself. I just love watching him shove something in his mouth or use the fork and be so excited. That being said, it's always messy and takes 2 to 3 times as long when he does it. Yeah. And I mean, really messy. I'm sure you have kids, you can imagine you've worked with kids, but spaghetti sauce all over the floor. Thank goodness we have a dog. Or if he doesn't really like something, he'll throw stuff on a spoon and just get it all over the kitchen. So I'd say what we do now, it's kind of a 50-50. Typically, we start off the meal if it's something like he eats omelets a lot in the morning. So we'll cut it up into pieces, put it on a plate, one of those sticky plates to the high chair, give him a fork and let him enjoy it. And then maybe put little bits of avocado toast or fruit on his plate too that he can use. At some point, if he starts to throw the food or be a little ridiculous, we'll take it away from him, put it out of his reach, and then we might offer him some bites. If he's eating something like my wife she's like, he loves to dip things. So we do grilled cheese and tomato soup a lot. And he he sure knows how to dip. He'll dip in and suck off the soup and then do it again. It's so cute. But if I'm feeding him soup or yogurt, I'm really hesitant to let him do that himself because it's catastrophically messy. And so I know the importance of letting him take the lead, but I want to just share what I'm doing and level set on that mix of approaches and if I have the right general intentions behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. You do. Soup is sort of an advanced age in the first year and even maybe into the second year of life in terms of being able to manage all of that. But you can, one trick that I always did with my kids, and I've seen other families do this too, is when he puts a spoon for his soup in his hand, you can cover your hand over his hand and do the guided training him what to do with that. Otherwise, he sticks his spoon and goes, woo, and it goes flying because he doesn't know what to do with it necessarily. And it's a challenging consistency in that it doesn't really stay on the spoon. That's a challenge for him. So it's a balancing challenge. It's a fine motor challenge to get it from his bowl to his mouth without spilling it. So you can support him by just putting your hand over his as he's using that spoon and let him be leading you, but kind of guide him at the same time. That's how you can train him. But yeah, absolutely. Start out letting him self-feed, and then you have good intuitions. There's never like one solid rule about how to do this. If he's doing great with an omelet and he's pecking along and eating and then starts to throw food, to me, that was always a sign that, okay, we're coming to the end of this meal. And that's that responsiveness, paying attention to his cues. And that's a cue. When kids start to get disinterested in eating, or they start becoming more interested in the dog than they are in eating, that's a sign that fullness is setting in and the meal's coming to an end. So I think you're spot on. I think you're paying attention to everything you need to as he's eating and supporting self-feeding, but also watching his cues. That's called responsive feeding, watching his cues and making sure that you're responding appropriately to those.
Nice. That makes a lot of sense. And as we're having this discussion, I'm reminded of how babies are sometimes easier because they can't reach into the cabinet and get out the Takis. Or I think it's a good time to transition to our older son, because I love what you're saying about our younger one and the general intuition being good and trusting him. He's learning how to trust us, and just the emphasis on natural cues. And one of the best pieces of advice I got having the baby was, you're the expert on your own child. Like, don't outsource parenting to somebody else. And so that's what I'm hearing from you above everything else is trust your intuition. And so with the older son, it's part of this, it's been a different relationship to navigate because he doesn't have another parent. So I don't think of him as a stepson. I've adopted him. He's my son, but I met him when he was 6. And so some of those early attachment years are not there. And he's also sort of half-baked when I met him in terms of his eating habits and what he likes. And so as he's becoming a teenager, what I see, and I know from talking to other parents and reading online, that he's not unique in that he loves all of the Taki MSG seasoning stuff. He loves Whataburger. He has DoorDash on his phone. And so he uses his allowance every week to order himself a Whataburger. He loves red meat to the point where we were on vacation and realized he had eaten like steak tacos and burgers for every meal. And we're like, okay, dude, you need a little bit of a detox. And so it's hard because we want to encourage healthy habits. And there's a lot going on. There's him just not wanting to eat salad because we're asking him to eat salad. He's 13. There is him not eating during the school day typically because he's on his ADD medicine. If he eats anything, it's very little because he's just not hungry. And we're trying to honor that as well and not stuff him full of stuff. While he loves a good meal, he'd rather be playing a game or exploring something new. And so he's not really food motivated. So when we do sit him down to eat, how do we get enough calories into him and still maintain that healthy component? So, and it's hard because we'll be like, you need to eat more, because he'll joke that he's a skinny boy and you can see his ribs. And we're like, okay, let's eat something. But I know that I can't control him. And the most important thing that I can do is model, especially at this age, model healthy behaviors. Try not to get my own biases about not liking meat, or fast food, like to the point where he feels like he wants to rebel against that. But in a busy life, in a time when we're trying to get high quality calories into him, what are some things to think about, whether it's an attitude or specific tactical practices to support him? Because one more thing I'll say before I turn it over to you is that he says he's a very good salesperson and and lawyer, really. And he says that if we don't let him find his own way, he's going to go crazy when he goes off to college and just go the opposite way and rebel against everything. So is there truth to that? Is abstinence and restriction not a good strategy because he'll go crazy the other way? Or what's kind of the most important things to focus on?
Yeah, I think for all kids his age, structure is still really important, especially with ADHD, because children with ADHD do really well with structure, right? It's when it's not structured that things can get a little wonky. In terms of, the medication inhibiting his appetite, I'm always a big fan of sending something along to school, right? It might be just a carton of chocolate milk, or it could be a bar, a protein bar, something. If he does have an appetite, that it's going to have like a real punch to it. It's certainly not going to replace a meal, but it's going to give him something. The other thing is what I've seen work really well with kids when they come home is not having a snack, but actually having a meal when they get home, like having a meal prepared for them because they haven't had much to eat throughout the day. They've got a good appetite. It's usually when the medications are starting to wear off and their appetite is coming back, and you can have your child snacking on Takis, a bag of Takis after school, or you can sit them down with a sandwich and some soup, or maybe leftovers from the night before, or pasta that you've got already cooked and you're just reheating with some meat sauce or tomato sauce or however you serve it, but like something that's super substantial, like a meal right after school. And it's probably there's a pretty good chance that if you're serving dinner 3 hours after school, I'm assuming he's getting home around 3 and you're sitting down for dinner around 6, that he should have his appetite. He should have an appetite for a decent meal at that point again. So that's sort of a strategical, tactical thing that you can do. And then of course the bedtime snack. That's always something I leaned on with children who are struggling to keep their weight on, either because of medications or even exercising on a sport or what have you. That bedtime snack, a substantial bedtime snack, not just, it might be a bowl of cereal with milk and fruit on top, peanut butter toast and milk before bed, or milk substitute. I'm not sure what your food preferences are or practices, but something, again, substantial before bed, because at bedtime, we're not running around. We're not burning calories. We're going to sleep. And so those calories kind of stick to the ribs and help children who may not be getting enough nutrition during the day sort of recuperate that at night, overnight. So you've got this space during the day where there's not a lot of eating. You're just backing all that eating up. Mm-hmm. You're shifting it a little bit later. I think the other important thing for his age is this idea of structure and sacredness of the family meal. Meaning, even if you're not hungry, even if you don't like what we're serving, you need to be with us at the table. No distractions, no phones, no games. No, this is family time and it's non-negotiable. That sends the message that sends an expectation, but it also sends the message that family time is important. This is when we get together. This is when we communicate. This is when we connect, and nothing gets in the way of that. I think that's super important. Even though he's a teenager, or a very young teenager, you're entering into that time of life where he needs his parents to be the main influence, because he's going to be influenced by lots of other things and people and ideas. And he needs his home front parents still being a significant influence in his life. And that's the best way to do that, I think. Family table.
Yeah. And it's fun because, especially with our youngest one there now, it really does feel like a family table with a toddler being nuts and throwing food and
causing everybody to laugh.
Yes. Being obsessed with his big brother. I mean, we even have this game of our youngest one claps and then crosses his hands and we all imitate. It's like Simon Says. And that developed on vacation when we were having every single meal in a restaurant together, just extra family time. And what you're saying about the sacredness of the family meal and the no technology, we definitely practice that for the most part. But I think this helps me reinforce the importance of that. And just the other night, I said, it's okay if you're not hungry. You need to sit down with us. And we had gotten takeout and we were all sitting down to eat. And it's so funny because, of course, he says he's not hungry. But then if I force him to sit down and eat, guess what happens? Or sit down and watch us eat.
He wants to eat.
Yes, he eats naturally. So it's because you mentioned the medicine. And then he also has Invisalign braces. And so every time he has to take them out, rinse out, it's a big ordeal. And then he also has a milk allergy. And so there's just a lot of stuff to navigate and a lot of excuses that get in the way of eating, or challenges. I don't want to say excuses, just challenges to address. And I wish that he were home every day on a consistent schedule, but he's in almost every single extracurricular that there can be. And so, for example, tonight, we won't have a family dinner because he's going to ninja training, but I will give him a meal snack after school, like you said. Yep. And then he'll eat again after ninja, which will be even later. So he'll get a lot of good food in. Yep. And then doing the family dinner whenever we can with especially the two brothers. I mean, seeing them together is just, it's the sweetest thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And kids today are really super, super busy, but they still need that grounding of family time together and the guidance. And that's what I would say would be my 2 words for teenagers: grounding and guidance. You're still in charge. They still need the adults in their lives to tell them what's okay and what's not okay, what's expected and where you can loosen the reins. But they need that guidance. And, that being together is what grounds them.
What would you say? It's hard for him to wake up these days as a teenager. And so he's been grabbing a lot of Uncrustable, those peanut butter sandwiches for breakfast. Not my favorite thing, but he likes them. They're 300 calories. They have fat and protein and carbs. So I think it's a win as opposed to not eating breakfast. So that's something we'll grab and go if he wants an extra snack on the go. Are there any other suggestions like that are simple, preferably frozen or sold at Costco, or really easy to implement, not too messy in the car, just things like that?
Yeah. I mean, what comes to mind are those Kodiak protein waffles or the Kodiak protein pancakes. You can toast them, or I've seen kids eat them cold, not frozen, but cold. You can spread them with nut butter or peanut butter, jam, honey and peanut butter. I think you can make, if you have time to scramble an egg and throw a piece of ham on top and cheese, you can make like an egg sandwich on those protein waffles. I don't know the nutritionals of these, but there are other brands that sell, like sausage, Canadian bacon and cheese already ready to roll, and you just microwave them. Or you can do what I used to do, which was make all of those in advance on a weekend and wrap them and freeze them. I'd wrap them in tin foil and stick them in the freezer and just warm them up, unwrap them, warm them up in the microwave, wrap it back up in the tin foil or whatever you want to, and just take it in the car. So egg sandwiches, if he can have eggs and Canadian bacon or turkey sausage. You might skip the cheese if he's milk allergic, or get a non-dairy cheese. I'm not sure what you're doing with that, but there are things like that you can make in advance, right? And just stick in the freezer, especially since your wife likes to cook. She can make up a few of those over the weekend. She can make higher protein waffles, or you can get the waffle powder, the boxed waffle powder where you just make them yourself. And then do you ever do like a milk alternative that he could take with him on the go? Like a smaller plastic or carton soy milk or anything like that? Because if he likes that, like a chocolate soy milk with his peanut butter sandwich and banana is great, easy on the go, easy to eat, wash it down. And that together combined, you can get 500, 600, 700 calories when you add those things to the peanut butter sandwich.
That's a great point. He's super picky in particular. We got a different brand of the Uncrustables that's supposed to be healthier. And he was like, this is not an Uncrustable. I'm not. He's like, it's square shaped.
If it's any consolation, my son, who is 22, bought Uncrustables and stuck them in the freezer last time he came home. I'm like, I personally had never bought them before. I've seen them all the time. But he bought them. So there you go, right there.
They're
Dietitian's
popular.
son is buying them too.
Yeah.
I think they're easy.
Mm-hmm. And I do think with the, we do A2 milk so it just, what I'm hearing you say is that it's planning and intentionality, that all this stuff is possible. We can make our own versions of breakfast sandwiches in the freezer. It just is going to take some thinking about it and then making time to do it, which I actually love to cook as well. I bake more, honestly, but breakfast sandwiches are right up my alley, the protein pancakes. And it can be kind of fun to do that and nurture the boys in that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because not everything you do as a mom works, right? You put all this time and energy and effort into it. You have this grand idea of how he's going to heat up a sandwich every morning. And he's like, nope, we're buying him more Uncrustables. Like, I don't like this. So it's about putting in the effort and intentionality and not getting too attached to the results and figuring out what works, I think. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I think feeding kids is right there, what you just said. Intentionality, execution, and not being attached to the outcomes. Right there. See, you already know.
It's easily said. Easily said, hard to do.
So as we wrap up this conversation, how are things feeling for you now?
Good. I feel some of what I suspected or felt or experienced has been validated. And then I feel like I have some simple things to think about and prioritize, whether it be an attitude or a specific tactical thing that I can do. Again, to know, I love that we ended with that I can't make anything happen, especially the older they get, but I can do everything possible to lay the foundation for them to get the nutrients they need and to have a healthy relationship with food. And there are some ways without too much additional effort on my part that I can do that and really support the boys. So I appreciate this conversation very much.
I appreciate you too. And I think you have some very common struggles with just being a mom and executing the day-to-day feeding and adjusting and never really knowing if it's going to work, but you're in it for the game, right? You're in it for the long haul. And that's a good thing because that's what your boys need, right? Yeah. So thanks for coming on the show and sharing what life is like for you right now, and stay in touch and let us know how you do.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jill.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening to The Nourished Child, and many thanks to my anonymous guest for sharing their time, their questions, their worries and concerns so that you could understand, as I coached her through those things, how you might be able to think through these challenges that you're having with perhaps your own child. If you want to come on The Nourished Child, send me an email at jill@jillcastle.com, or you can go to thenourishedchild.com, hit the podcast tab, and there's a little microphone and you can record your question. I'm happy to provide a free counseling anonymous session for those of you who would like to come on the show and have that experience. Just let me know. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support this show and my work, please take a minute to follow the podcast, leave a rating and a review, and visit thenourishedchild.com and sign up for my weekly newsletter, The Munch. You can also follow me on Instagram at i.am.pdrd, and don't forget to take the Healthy Habits quiz on thenourishedchild.com and pre-order my upcoming book, Kids Thrive at Every Size. That's it for today, folks. Make sure you give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.